Okay, we just actually wanted to take a moment. Jamie and I were actually just talking behind the scenes, and we were saying thank you to Derek, as well as John and Craig and Doug, for putting together such an amazing presentation. It's unlike anything we've ever seen before, and we know that's something near and dear to all of your hearts. So thank you very much for that. We'd also like to thank Randy, Bill Hulbert, and Bryce Seaver from the SCPGA, as well as the teaching committee for putting together the beautiful book that all of you received earlier. So let's give them a round of applause, please. Fitness has become an increasingly essential component in our sport, which we have seen firsthand with our stable of touring professionals that play out of Virginia Country Club. It's something that they're all working on every day, which leads us to introduce our next speaker. Leo Rooney is the Chief Operating Officer of Urban Golf Performance. It's a one-stop shop for golfers of any level to enhance their golf games, health, and physical fitness with personalized guidance. Leo grew up playing national-level table tennis in Stockholm, Sweden, and was an NC2A academic All-American at Cal Baptist University, where he played on the men's golf team. Following his collegiate career, he played professionally and competed at the highest level in long driving competitions. He came to Urban Golf Performance as a fitness trainer in 2016 and currently oversees all locations in all aspects, from recruiting to managing, promoting, and programming. He has coached and trained players on the PGA and LPGA tours, including Colin Morikawa and Lilia Vu, as well as many elite juniors. Today, we will be fortunate to hear him speak on his 3-3-3 method and how to enhance your golf game through physio. Please join us in welcoming Leo Rooney up to the stage.
All right. Does this work? 1, 2, 1, 2. You can hear me okay? Great. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Leo Rooney. Grew up just outside Stockholm, playing table tennis and golf and soccer, and I was probably best at table tennis, but then golf took over. I have a strong theory on table tennis for golf, but that's for a different talk. I grew up, playing golf, and I don't know if this is going to work. I have about 100 clicks, so we'll see how that goes. So right now, I am running UGP together with a great team of 50 people. Sorry when I don't see this. So I played both in college and professionally. I was recruited to come play in Riverside, just an hour from here, 12 years ago. So I came over here to play college golf. And in college, I started studying exercise physiology and got really into the body, spending a lot of time in the lab figuring out how can I combine my two biggest passions, fitness and golf. And so when my playing career ended, I started working with golfers full-time, training them, figuring out how to improve their performance. And I also started to coach a little bit, so I was a hybrid coach. I did both coaching and fitness. And so the goal today is to talk to you about how training can impact golf performance, and also a little bit about the swing and body connection, and making sure that we collaborate with coaches and trainers and physios together to set up the best plan for each player. So Urban Golf Performance, we're based here in Southern California. It was started by Mac Todd in 2013, so we've been around for 10 years. We have a team of 50 people now working as teams in each location. So we have coaches, trainers, recovery specialists, fitters, builders, mental coaches. Now we also have a tour department. So 7 departments under one roof working together with each player. So at UGP, it's all about the team, not the individual. So we help each player as a team, and we work together instead of working individually with each player. We work with any player, so from complete beginners that have never touched a club to major winners like Lilia Vu, Alison Corpus, or Colin Morikawa. And so, as you can see, that's our Santa Monica location there. Each location has about 12 to 14 team members working together. So We all dress the same. We work on the same team, regardless of our role. We try to learn as much as we can about each department so that we can help the player the best way possible. That's what we believe will create the best results. Helping the tour player was never really the goal of UGP. It was to create an experience in golf performance that was nothing like anything else. Over the years, we got a better and better team to the point where we started to work with better players. We started with training the UCLA men's golf team in 2017, and then we started helping Colin in 2018. And so now we have 18 players or so on our tour roster, helping them perform better, training them, treating them, coaching them. We actually are now traveling full-time on tour with our PGA Tour players. Ryan, who's actually here, he travels full-time with our PGA Tour players. We've had a pretty fun year with 3 majors on the women's side, and Kurt winning at Bay Hill. So that has been growing and growing, but all we care about is creating the best possible experience for every single player that comes through the door. It doesn't matter who they are or what they've done previously. So the 3-3-3 model. So today we're going to go over the 3 basically fundamental topics that we talk about at UGP when it comes to training. So the big 3 are the fundamentals of the fitness programs at UGP. The 3 main goals is why we train, and the 3 planes of motion is how we train. So let's jump into it. The big 3 is a concept that we came up with maybe 7, 8 years ago. This is nothing new. This is nothing groundbreaking. But one question that I love to ask, and it's a great thought experiment for, I think, any coach, is what are some of the universal truths that we believe everybody can agree on? Me and Mac have a podcast, and we usually ask this question to coaches. Is there one thing that, let's say, this room of coaches could agree on? Grip, low point. Is there one universal truth in golf coaching? Does anybody have the courage to raise their hand? All right. Impact. In what way impact?
It's the collision of the ball and the club.
Yeah, actually Carl Welted, that was probably the best explanation of a universal truth, potentially. But you see an argument for any type of different visual or style of swinging the golf club out there. But it's a great question to ask yourself, what are your top 3 universal truths in your coaching? And the way I did this was, a lot of times when we work with golfers, we have to answer a question about anything with, it depends. Depends on the player, depends on the person, depends on the background. But what if we can't say it depends? What if we're not allowed to say that? What do we do? What type of training program would you put 100 people on that you would never meet or never talk to? Let's say you could only send them a letter. What drill would you send them? What concept would you try to teach them? These are 100 individuals. And I think that's a great question to ask yourself to see what you care about, what your biases are in coaching. And this is what we did, and we really looked at the body, and it was clear that the hip was very important. It was clear that the trunk was important, and the relationship between the hip and the trunk. In this presentation, we're going to call it T-spine, but it's the trunk. So I would encourage everyone, all the coaches in here, to ask that question. What are those top 3 that you would put in your coaching?
I get one.
Go for it.
Athletic fundamentals.
athletic fundamentals, yeah.
How to throw a ball?
It's not bad. It's not bad. I don't think we got a single similar or same answer from over 50 episodes on our podcast from any coach. So it becomes sometimes arbitrary to coach, and I'm sure you feel that as well. Because if you go to 10 different coaches, you probably, with the same player, you might get 10 different prescriptions. So we track all our fitness assessments. So we do 22 tests, and we have assessed probably well over 1,500 players, but this data set is well over 1,000. So what are the most common physical disruptors? So we do those 22 tests to see how far away are you from your physical potential. Our goal is just to make sure that you can play at your potential so that we don't slow you down in getting better at golf. The most common disruptors are unfortunately also the most important. So hip, 78%. X factor, which is the relationship between hip and trunk and the separation between the two. And then T-spine or trunk rotation. And when we talk about the big three, we don't talk only about mobility, we talk about function, we talk about mobility, stability, control, coordination, and strength. So if we look at, let's see if I can go back to Rory. Can't. There we go. So to go over that, as you can see, Rory has one of the highest or biggest X factor stretches in the world. So if you've seen Rory live, he's not very tall, but arguably one of the best drivers of the ball, maybe of all time, eventually, we'll see. But hits it really far too. Why? Because he has a big X factor stretch. There's other variables at play. But you see how much rotation he gets in the upper body, in the trunk. And the reason it's called X factor is because you see the separation between the hip and the trunk. It creates an X if you look from above. And then the hip. As a golfer, we need a lot of hip mobility to function well in the golf swing because we rotate a lot. So those are the big three. Those are the lowest hanging fruits. That's what we found could improve those 100 people. If we couldn't talk to them, we would give them a program with the big three and just leave them, and hopefully they get better. And let's talk a little bit about the big three, like improving it. Will it actually improve your golf game? Because that's our goal. And why is it important to work on the big three? So if we start with the hip, for example, there's a lot of high forces in the golf swing. So we have the fastest object in sports. I think the long drivers are up at 250 or something crazy now. And the ball is the fastest in sports, and you're swinging something faster than anything else in sports as well. But the culture in golf is not really acting like it. We don't really warm up. We don't really prepare our body to do that. Why? Because it happens so quickly. So the acceleration time in the downswing is less than a second. So you don't actually feel the forces that are happening that quickly. So we have no idea whether the club is controlling you or if you are controlling the club. And I'm actually going to demonstrate. Who in here hits it over 300 yards? All right, come up here. Come up here. All right, so what's your name? Brennan.
Brennan, yeah.
Nice to meet you. So with us, we have a 7-iron here, but the forces involved in the golf swing are pretty high. So when you measure this, we're just going to use a simple number. If you swing, 115, 20 miles per hour, there's at least 100 pounds of force that you're creating in the club. So we're going to talk about impact position here. So Brennan, if you hit your 7-iron that way, so set up. Well, I have big hands. So if Brennan lets go of the club at impact at high speeds, where is that club going to go? This way, right? So the directional force is this way. And let's just say it's 100 pounds. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. But imagine 100 pounds of force pulling the club this way. So I'm going to pull it probably 20 pounds, not even close to what it actually is. And I want you to get into impact position. Okay, I'm going to pull first. Go back. Okay, so I'm going to pull. Make sure you can hold it. Stay back.
It's a big grip.
Go. Come on. You're strong, Brandon. Come on. There you go. All right. So what are you sensing? What are you feeling in your body to stay back, to resist that force going this way?
Feet.
Feet? What else?
Hand.
Okay. What else in your body?
Hip.
Hip? All right. So the core, the hip, everything is turning on, but the only reason he feels that is because we're doing it slowly. Speed will mask that. It happens like that. So we have to create force this way to resist that. Correct? So this club is pulling him this way, and this hip needs to be strong and mobile enough to stay back and resist all that force going this way. So another thing, for example, is at 100 miles per hour, we need grip strength. We need 88 pounds of grip strength. If we don't have that grip strength, what's going to happen? Well, sometimes if you set up, this is where, and we're going to get into it later, we have to ask ourselves, is it hardware or software? If you're a coach, you're working a lot on software. If you're a trainer, you work on hardware. So if the hardware, let's say his grip pressure, is not strong enough at 100 miles per hour, what's going to happen to the club? Well, and sometimes the body goes towards the ball. We call that early extension. Why is that so common? Because not everybody is strong as Brennan. Okay? But what happens if we don't have the grip pressure? Well, sometimes the swing plane can get high. So hands come up high, and if you work a lot with TrackMan and know the numbers, pros have a lower swing plane, amateurs have a higher swing plane. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So we have to assess whether it's hardware or software, and we have to understand that we're creating a lot of forces in the golf swing, and so that's how the big three can transfer into the golf swing, improve the golf swing. Because if you're not strong and mobile and stable enough in the hip, you're not going to be able to create force in that opposite direction. Now, a lot of times it's both hardware and software, so the coach and the trainer need to work together. Because this is not always the body's fault, and it's not always the swing's fault. We have to assess. But if you look at Rory, I don't know how well you see the screens, but you see just how much he is creating separation between upper and lower body, and for that hip to not move towards the ball, there's a lot of strength and mobility and control required to do that at that speed. And we obviously need to kind of show you how to work on it. In training, there's a lot of different ways to improve hip mobility, for example. So I'm just going to show you 3 examples because I want you to leave here with some actual takeaways, things that you can start doing right away yourself. Because at UGP, we'll do this in the bay. Like, we don't have to do it in the gym. We can do it right there in the bay. We can start working on hip mobility, and we can see, is it improving? Is it transferring into the swing? I'm just doing some simple 90-90 here. If you've never worked on internal hip rotation, when you do it, you're going to feel that you've never done it. Okay? And you need internal hip rotation to turn in here and turn in there. If you don't have it, you're going to have compensations elsewhere in the swing. T-spine, again, there's a lot of different ways to do this. This is just a half kneeling, spiraling rotation. So there's nothing stopping you from doing this in the bay and then see how they feel after that. Maybe their backswing will feel better. Maybe they feel a little bit looser. An X factor, this is our level 1 X factor, keeping the upper body still and rotating the lower body. And the thing with the big 3, you never stop working on it. It's not something that once you've passed the test, okay, we're done. We have to continue to work on it a lot. So here, whoa, 17 steps forward. We got to go back to quite far. Am I doing that, or? I was hoping you go back. Okay. Can you go to after the videos? So basically, keep going. Once we have learned how to control the X factor, we have to continue to improve it. How did that happen? So here's Colin. You doing our level 4 X factor exercise. So Colin is a very advanced mover, so he can do this movement. But we're essentially working on separating upper and lower body, and he makes it look easy. It's pretty hard. And he's a great example of, back in 2018 when we started working with him, he was in college, and he didn't have very good hip mobility. He didn't have very good neck mobility. There was a lot of things we could improve, and so we did the 22 tests. We figure out how can we improve, and that's our job as a trainer. That's all we can do. Doesn't mean he's going to become a better golfer. We can't guarantee that. So the big 3, it's the low-hanging fruit, it's the fundamentals. You can trace almost any swing fall back to the big 3. So whether that's over the top, early extension, hanging back, sway, slide, they usually trace back to one of the 3. Now we're going to get into the 3 main goals of golf fitness. So we want to figure out why do golfers need to train? Why is that even important? It's becoming more and more popular and systematic, but it's still somewhat new. So the first goal for us at UGP, and this is just our philosophy, there's a lot of other philosophies, but we want to ensure that physical disruptors does not slow down golf development. That's our only goal, is to make sure that the coach and their swing is not limited by their body. So it's not necessarily about hitting it really far or getting super fit or a six-pack. It's about making sure that golf development can happen. So how do we define golf fitness? What is golf fitness? There's a lot of different definitions of golf fitness. If you look at the word fitness, it can be defined as the quality of being able to fulfill a task. What is the task in this case? Well, it's not fitness, it's actually golf, right? So we want to figure out how can we prepare them for the task? How can we prepare the player for the task? So we want to address the physical disruptors that allow them to perform the task more efficiently over time. So if your body is the hardware, your brain is the software. So as coaches, you're working a lot on the software, how to work the hardware better, but sometimes the hardware is limiting you as a coach. So we have to be really good at, okay, we have an issue. Is it hardware or is it software? Because if we start working on only software and the hardware is not good, or learn a little bit enough yourself to figure out how to improve those basic things, those basic physical needs that you need to play good golf. So, software, hardware, very important. A quick note here, because I know it's happening more and more in the golf industry. So, for example, if we're going to talk about enabling golf performance by limiting physical disruptors, this is Kurt Kitayama. We started working with him last year, and this was his single leg lowest ability test, okay? So one of the longest hitters on tour, but needs accuracy, okay? So we're just testing how's his knee tracking, how stable is it, and one of his main goals was getting more accurate. He was hitting it 330, but it wasn't always straight. And it's harder to hit it straight when you hit it long. So we started working on lower body stability, right? Because the test showed us that he needs it, and he needs it bad. This was not long ago, so now Kurt can obviously do it no problem. He can probably do it with a 45-pound dumbbell as well. He's very strong. So here's the question. You saw the test, and now you see the result of the training. Is that going to guarantee him getting more accurate? Maybe. You can't guarantee anything in golf. There's too many variables. So as trainers, we can never say, if you do this, you're going to start playing better. Or if you improve your big three, you're going to shoot lower scores. We can never do that. Because there's hundreds of variables in the score at the end of the day. So all we can do, though, is control what we can control. So we want to do all the tests, and we want to improve all the things that give us the best opportunity to play at our potential. Why would you leave that on the table when you don't have to? So just quickly on that, just because you improve the hardware doesn't mean that the software is now going to start using that new hardware. So Chris Como is Kurt's coach. We have to communicate really closely with Chris to ensure that the software and hardware is actually communicating. Because sometimes you can improve something in the hardware, but the software is not running that program yet. And sometimes it never will, and that's okay. But what we can do is we want to control all the variables that we can. So a quick note on kind of when golf coaching merges with fitness training, and you've seen this probably more and more on social media, where a coach will start to maybe help the player, rotate the hips or assist the hips, or getting a little bit more physical with the player. And I just want to talk a little bit about that, because I think it's great that coaches are getting more knowledgeable. They start to understand anatomy. There's some really fancy words being thrown out from coaches now. And a lot of the stuff that you see is basically R&T, which is reactive neuromuscular training. So if you have a student that wants to rotate the hips more, what do? Well, sometimes you'll see the coach help the hips rotate, but what does that do? So in R&T training, we actually want to feed the fault, okay, not the opposite. Let's actually bring up someone here real quick for a demonstration. Who has great balance in their golf swing? You come out here, real quick. So, very simply, this won't take long. Thank you for doing it.
No problem.
Set up with the club there.
Okay. That's in
That's fine.
right?
Yep. So,
the grip.
I know.
We got to work on that.
So if, for example, he's moving forward and he's too much on his toes, if we want to push him, in what direction should we push him to correct the fault? This way, right? So that's the fault. We feed the fault. Okay? Let's say we need more hip rotation, and you see someone here helping the hip. Well, that's creating the opposite of what we want, right? Because now, in order to get more hip rotation, we should actually resist the rotation, right? That's it. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So, by the way, if anybody has questions while I go, please raise your hand, because I'm totally fine interrupting and answering. So, we want to make sure that if we're going to get involved, make sure you feed the fault to get the correct movement. Because it's super, super powerful. Very powerful. R&T training is, if you're starting messing with the shaft, you get very, very powerful results. But if you're doing it in the wrong direction, it doesn't do much good. So, we don't want to help the fault because it could worsen the movement. So the second goal is making sure that injuries does not stop golf development. Obviously, if we're trying to improve the task, an injury would basically stop you from practicing. So we want to make sure that we address anything in the body that can potentially get overworked or stressed. So we can't improve our task if we're injured. Can you prevent injury? The research says basically no. We have to just get as strong as possible, mobile, functional as possible to give ourselves the best chance to not get injured, but we can't completely remove the risk of injury. For example, the big three, if we go back to that for a second, if the hips are tight, the hips should be mobile. T-spine is tight, the T-spine should be mobile. What's in between those two things? The low back. Okay, so the low back will now pay for the price because this can't move and this can't move. And the modern lifestyle of sitting, driving, desktop, watching TV, whatever, these hips, these joints that are supposed to be mobile are now not. That's why, and now we're trying to swing at 100 miles per hour around our body, and your joints don't move, you're going to have issues. So the short answer, we can't really truly prevent injury, but we can make sure we prepare the hardware as well as we can, right? And make it as functional as possible. Our last goal is to enable golf development with less swing thoughts, or at least less internal swing thoughts. So how does that relate to fitness? Because it sounds kind of like a coaching thing. And that is true, but we can actually improve something physically so you don't have to think about it over the ball. And this is a body of research that I feel very strongly about. Attentional focus research that Michelle Wolf started in the late 90s at UNLV. Amazing research that is still not mainstream. Basically, and what's cool is she did a lot of the research on golf in the beginning. So we're spoiled there. But what basically the research says is the further away your attention and focus is from the body, the better the performance. And the closer the attention and the focus is on your body parts or body movements, the worse the performance. That's just generalized. So we can actually make sure that we can be over the ball and feel athletic and not have to think about rotating the hips or keeping the head still or whatever you're working on. Right? There's a lot of swing thoughts that are ineffective. But we know what flow happens when internal chatter is low. So not only do we use the principle of attention in our training at UGP, because really what it's about is how you cue an exercise or how you cue a drill. But it's also how you cue the golfer when coaching. So if we have a lot of internal chatter, if we're thinking about our body a lot, it's proven that we have more co-contractions. So the goal is to automate athletic movement. And by the way, in the late 90s, when this research came out, they didn't really understand why did the performance go up so much when we focused on something outside the body. And then they started doing research with EMG sensors. And the simplest study that explains this pretty well, I think, is a basketball study. And it was just free throws. They put EMG sensors on the bicep and the tricep. And one group was instructed to focus on the hoop, essentially, the target. One group was coached to focus on the wrist movement. And this was the first time we really started to understand why is an external focus better for performance. Well, they saw that the group that was focusing on the wrist movement now had co-contractions between bicep and tricep. So what that is when we extend, the bicep need to relax. But when you have internal chatter, they contract at the same time. And that creates a choppy athletic movement. So imagine then the biomechanical party that golf is, and how many co-contractions that can happen in theory all over the place if we have one internal thought that hijacks the whole system. Again, going back, how can training improve this? Well, you can improve the body, the hardware, so the coach don't have to talk so much about the body. A lower neuromuscular interference is even more important under pressure. When we're under pressure, we want to make sure that we're in flow, we have an external focus. When Steph Curry is shooting three-pointers, he's not thinking about his angle of his elbow, I'll tell you that. But in golf, we do it quite a bit. This is J.H. Taylor. He won 5 British Opens. And this is what I love about history is they knew this stuff back then. I'm certain that there can be no freedom and no natural swing in hitting the golf ball if the mind is occupied by instructing the body. I mean, essentially, a very long time ago, he summarized what the research was going to eventually show. Now, to our last part here, the 3 planes of motion. We live in 3 dimensions, I think you know that. We actually happen to play golf in 3D as well, but is fitness done in 3D? Traditional weight training, any type of fitness training, is it done in 3D? Well, a lot of times it's not. So let's talk about the planes first and then we'll get into it. So in exercise science, we have 3 planes of motion. This is how we measure movement. The sagittal plane is basically up and down. The frontal is side to side, and transverse is rotational. So I'm going to show you 3 different exercises so you really understand and clearly can see the 3 planes of motion. This is Marcus. He trains Lilia Vu and Bo Hostler, an incredible trainer. And he's simply doing an offset kettlebell lunge. But he's working primarily in the sagittal plane because he's going up and down. Now, he's doing a side lunge, working side to side. That's the frontal plane. And then transverse, very simple. Now he's rotating, right? So when we train, it would make sense if we train in all three planes, right? Because that's how we play golf. It's also how we are kind of functioning in life as well. Unfortunately, most of fitness is done in one plane. So whether you're cycling, biking, those are the same. Running, squatting, push-ups, sit-ups. What plane? Sagittal plane. All right. So that's, a little bit of a problem when you're not a cyclist or you're not a runner because you're not really working in all the planes that you're playing your sport in. So we live in 3D, we play golf in 3D, so we should train in 3D. So, can we go back a couple? So we want to make sure that every training session has all three planes. It's simply the most logical thing to do. And of course, the sagittal plane is important, but we do it so much anyways. We are really ignoring the frontal plane and the transverse. And you can make a good argument that in golf, those are maybe the two most important planes. Single plane movers become one-dimensional players. I don't know if you've seen like a CrossFitter swing a golf club. It's usually not beautiful. But if we look at the next slide, if we look at Tiger, backswing, where is he going? Side, right? He's loading up to his right side. There's a lot more forces than it looks. And then he's going violently to the other side, 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 side. And I think we all know that we're rotating quite a bit in the golf swing. So the primary two planes of motion, frontal and transverse, is key in our training. We've got to make sure that we get that in because a lot of times people are, not sufficient, especially in the frontal plane. If they're golfers, they usually can rotate okay because they've done it their whole life, but the frontal plane is not good. And you see all kinds of problems in the golf swing because of that. So, to summarize the 3-3-3 model, the big three, the fundamentals, really being able to assess the hip, the trunk, and the relationship between the two, and understanding that it doesn't have to be that difficult. You as a coach can actually get into it, start working on it, and see the improvements just for yourself. And why not do some of the movements while you're teaching them? You can do that easily. These are simple mobility movements. The three main goals of golf fitness, this is why we train. We want to make sure we understand how it can impact your golf, and basically the cost of not doing it as well. And then the three planes of motion, really how we train, making sure we create well-rounded, functional athletes. Because the golf swing, again, such a powerful move. We need to prepare the body for the movement. That is literally our goal. So if we're not preparing the body, then the coach will have a challenge to train the software to run that hardware efficiently. That is my time. And thank you very much. Have for me. Yeah.
Are you similar to the TPI?
So I've gone through TPI, yeah, and TPI are pioneers in our space. So I know Dave and Greg really well, and so I've gone through TPI and love what they've done for. I mean, I probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for TPI, right? What they've done for fitness in golf is unbelievable. So taking and stealing ideas from everyone, I think, if that was the question.
Kind of like another.
Yeah. We got 4 locations now. We're building out our 5th location in Austin, Texas right now. We are going to build 10 locations in the next 5 years. And so we're always looking to grow, and we are applying, in a way, what TPI created, but we're actually opening the locations and doing what they taught and continuing what they started. And so, yeah, if that answers your question. Yeah.
Can you give us a couple different examples of some of the screens that you do?
Yeah. So, like for the big 3, for example, because this, a big takeaway from today, you can literally simply just sit down and make sure that the knees are together and see how far you can rotate both ways. I mean, this is a very basic TPI test. X factor, you basically check if they can rotate lower body without moving this. By the way, basically almost 100% of golfers will fail one of the 3. So the hardware is a problem. And if you stand and look at it like a charity event with 140 golfers hitting, if you're used to looking at golf swings all day, you as coaches or trainers, if you start looking and you're like, is it hardware or software? A lot of times it's both, but you can see that the path of the club is determined by the hardware and the software. And then you can add genetics a little bit. But that literally creates the path of the club. That is what makes up how you swing the golf club. And that will be their DNA, like their DNA. You can't really almost change it. You have to just improve it. Because their DNA is determining how you're going to swing that club. And then the hip, TPI does a lower quarter test where you want to make sure you can go past 65 degrees. We do a lot of other different tests on the hip, but that's a simple one to do, right? So making sure you can get to 65 degrees here. So those are the 3 tests that would be for the big 3. Any other questions? Yeah.
So you're not going to give us any insight on your table tennis versus...
I've never seen anybody go from, let's say, beginner to like 5 handicap in 2 years, or go from 20 to a scratch in 2 years, unless they played any, like one of the racket sports, hockey, baseball, or golf when they grew up. So that means that sport history really matters. I don't think I would have been a great golfer without table tennis. So you learn spin dynamics, and because the paddle is so close to your hand, you understand face control. You also learn spin dynamics, right? There's a lot of spin in table tennis, so you have to learn how to put spin on a ball and learn those types of dynamics. So hand-eye coordination, the list goes on. But, I heard Boyd talk earlier today. I love him. I strongly believe that, developing junior golfers, we have to make sure that they also play some other sports. And if you want them to get really good at golf, table tennis is a great sport. You can have any racket sport, but really the transfer is pretty clear, and it's very, very powerful. So if you have someone doing gymnastics in golf, gymnastics is not going to be good for golf. I mean, there's some sports that are truly not good for golf. So because a lot of the field sports, football, basketball, they teach you to not separate because you're moving around like this, right? You don't really do like this, for example. So that's my theory on table tennis. But yeah, and also it doesn't have to be serious. You just learn how to play it and get into it to learn those spin dynamics, to get hand-eye coordination. So, and if you started golf later in life, why not reverse engineer and try and expedite your golf development by starting with table tennis? Because you have to, in order to get good at golf fast, it's so incredibly difficult. So you have to do everything you can to condition your software to get good. So there's tricks to that. You can reverse engineer. So if you play some table tennis just a little bit on the side, I believe, there's no research on this, but I believe you can improve faster in the golf game. There's another question, yeah.
I know the answer is obviously you'd spend more time with this, but I have some high school golfers, they get to matches super late, they get run to the tee. If you only have a couple of minutes to warm up, would you have a priority on what you warmed up as a golfer?
Yeah, so great question. Warming up, and going back to what I talked about, how forceful the golf swing is. The culture in golf is just, we're acting like it's pool or something like that. Like we don't warm up at all, and then we have the fastest movement in sports. So how is the body going to be deal with that? How are we going to perform at our highest level? And so we always talk about a warm muscle is better than a cold stretched one. So stretching cold before you're teeing off, you can find research that show you're higher chance for injury then. Okay? So making sure that the muscles warms up. Like the temperature of the muscle is the main critical key, right? So what you do, do something in all three planes. Make sure you rotate, move side to side, up and down. This is a really cheap way to get warm very quickly. You can be very, very warm using this for 5 minutes before starting hitting golf balls. The warm-up should actually warm up the body and the nervous system. The neuromuscular system is not turned on if you don't activate the muscles. So if you start just cold hitting wedges, you haven't turned on the lights in the building. So we warm our athletes up more than probably anybody out there. So bordering to sweat, probably sweat in most cases. They shouldn't get tired, but they need to really be on before they go to the range. Because now they come to the range and they're ready to perform. They're ready to start to hit balls. So all three planes, basically the big three that we showed here today, and the three planes, those are simple warm-ups that you can do and then add the band to it. And if you're short on time, it literally only takes 5 minutes. But temperature is king. What other questions do you have? Yeah.
Would you say breathing helps with that as it relates to, before they play, working on you mentioned intensity in the nervous system, but
Yeah.
getting them to almost create intense breathing before they play so their body's warmer than just going out with a cold swing?
Yeah. Yeah, breathing is great. I think it depends a little bit on the player. If they like to be kind of high intensity.
It's not the normal one you see in a golf course, but
Yeah.
I imagine though that those breathing principles may.
Absolutely. Yeah, because breathing can change your heart rate. Breathing can change a lot of neuromuscular stuff. So it's very important. We would do probably that in the hotel room doing some breathing exercises to elicit something depending on the player. Yep. Any other questions? Anybody? Okay. Well, I'm available if you have any more questions. We're always hiring, we're growing, so if you know anybody that wants to come work for us, let me know. But I really appreciate Jamie setting this up, and thank you so much for your time.